I'm Donald Leggett and welcome to the latest London South East CEO interview. I'm delighted to be joined today by Rolf Gerritsen. He's the CEO of MetalNRG, the Natural Resources and Green Energy Investment Company. The focus of today's interview is the renewable energy JV, which they run with Eqtec. And we'll briefly touch upon MetalNRG's other interests, such as gold in Arizona, as well as oil and uranium. So an interesting company and an interesting chat, no doubt. Welcome, Rolf.
Good morning, Donald. Thank you for having me. Much appreciated.
No, it's absolutely a pleasure, and I'm really interested to hear about your company. So shall we dive in and ask away?
Yes, by all means.
Okay, MetalNRG has a range of different interests. So my first question to you, why hold such a wide range of investments? What do you see as the strategic benefits of having such reach?
There's really fundamentally three reasons for it. One is it increases our optionality. Two, it gives us flexibility in terms of the investment process. And three, each of these assets have different risk profiles. And therefore, as a result, we're going to receive different benefits from the investment. And that's really what we're trying to do, put together a diverse portfolio that has a coherent center to it. And the center is very much about projects that will generate short-term revenue. And that's where we're then trying to build up the story.
So short-term revenue is your focus?
That's our real focus. We're looking for projects that will offer us relatively short, 6 to 18 months revenue from those projects, so that we can invest at later stages in projects and not just greenfields.
Excellent. Now, there's a lot happening right now with the very interesting Eqtec JV. Now, how do you pronounce that?
Well, actually, there's a debate about that. I pronounce it EQTEK, but there's people who pronounce it Eqtec. I've heard David call it EQTEC, so I think he's probably the best, David Palumbo being the CEO of Eqtec. So I think that's probably the best way to go, Eqtec.
Excellent. So Eqtec JV, you've just done a share swap there, which is fascinating. That means you're deadly serious about this. Can I ask you what each party brings to the JV, and what are your joint plans going forwards?
What Eqtec bring to the party is, one, a wealth of expertise, experience, technical know-how, and some very, very strong, robust processes in the gasification, waste to gasification and waste energy processes. So they bring some real strength there. They have also been working on this for a lot longer than we have, and bring what I refer to as a number of shovel-ready projects. So they're projects that meet our investment criteria, that are relatively short in terms of time frame to get back into production. So those are really the two key areas, along with a very good and outstanding operational track record of previously implemented plants. So that's what they bring. What we bring to the party is, one, our investment process, and the fact that we've applied our investment process to natural resources, which is transferable in terms of skills, because there are a number of long lead items that need to be ordered for these plants, as well as managing that. So we have that expertise that we bring. And third is our interest to actually invest in the infrastructure and the asset infrastructure. And that's where our interest is, while there is more on the operating side. So it's a very good fit. And it's a natural, I think, a natural fit for the two of us to work together.
That's a very interesting answer. The first waste energy project for the JV is in Italy. So talk us through what's happening on the ground there right now.
Italy, right now on the ground, actually, there are a number of team members there. If I may, let me step back a little bit, Donald, and explain a little bit about the rationale. Italy was a plant which was previously in production. And when it was in production, it had secured premium tariffs to lock into the grid, into the main grid in Italy.
It was producing waste energy.
Waste energy, absolutely. And it was EQTEC's technology. Now, what happened or what occurred was that the plant was shut down because the holding group that owned the plant, but also had other activities, went into administration. What we did, along with a few investors and led by Eqtec, is we actually acquired the plant from the administrator in Italy. And that we went through a lengthy process that was managed and by Eqtec, and we ended up acquiring the plant last summer. What we then had is we were in a position to recommission that plant, and what that actually entails is that imagine a plant that was operating that hasn't been maintained to the level it should have been maintained, and it hasn't been taken care of for a period of about 12 to 18 months. So it was sitting there. And that means that you need to make sure that all the engineering and the mechanical elements are properly operating before you get it back into operation. There's a cleanup job, and just making sure all the engineering and the processing are actually working, and that the latest technology is being applied. At the same time, what we've done is we've renegotiated the feed. So we are using wood chips that come from the farms and that are very local, because we're in Tuscany, we're in a beautiful wine producing region, and there's a lot of wood chips coming out as waste from these farmlands that are very all over around us. And we've negotiated some better commercial terms that were previously in place. And when we recommission, we still have the benefit of the premium tariff, which was established when the plant was first commissioned. So that's where we are with it, and we anticipated being back in production middle of this year, so sometime in Q2 of this year.
And what costs has that incurred for you? Any capex?
We've made an investment of 700,000 euros, and that is giving us 26.6% of the equity.
Interesting. Okay. And shovel-ready projects you mentioned. Could you just run through those for us? And you said 2022 shovel-ready projects.
So if we look at what I define as shovel-ready, they're projects that have all of the permits in place. So the land has been acquired, the permits have been are in place, and we're now possibly looking at plants that were previously in production that have been stopped for whatever reason. And what we do is we're coming in with EQTEC and transforming those and bringing them back into production. So there's a number of plants that are being looked at, and with EQTEC, and there's probably about 4 that we're looking at carefully at the moment. And we're hopefully working towards further investments of at least 2 or 3 over the next 12 to 15 months.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. But it does indicate that actually getting into the waste energy market has been quite a rocky road for some companies. So why are you going to succeed where these previous companies have failed?
I think a lot of companies have failed because what has happened is they've gone in greenfield and they've started on very ambitious plans that they found very difficult to then implement. The second thing that I think with these plants is that you need a very strong group of companies that work towards getting it commissioned. We don't have the expertise as MetalNRG to take a plant from the initial design, through to permitting, through to development, into the actual commissioning of the plants. But what we have pieces of expertise within that process. If you then look at EQTEC, they bring with them a very strong background in the actual gasification process. They're working very closely with a number of universities that are doing the research. They're working with local partners. So they're building an ecosystem to bring these plants into production. And we are just one small part of that and have a role to play within that. And relying on their expertise and being part of a team that brings strength to the table gives me great confidence that we have a full package that can deliver and not fail as others have who have tried to do everything. So we're bringing in specific pockets of expertise, or EQTEC is bringing in specific pockets of expertise, putting that all together to make sure that we have success at the end of the line.
It's all been working out well so far, Rolf.
So far, so good. It's going very well. We've got local people in Italy that are very focused on the specificity of the plant. We have the EQTEC that are bringing in their technology, their processes. The commercial side is being dealt with locally in Italy, and what we're bringing is the willingness to invest in the infrastructure and the asset. So it's a very nice package, and it comes together very nicely, I believe. And the key here will be to establish it as a testing ground, not as a testing, as a demonstration of the operational capacity which we can build upon.
You also have interests in other areas, very interesting areas, which we're very familiar with: gold, oil, uranium. So why don't you briefly tell us about those different holdings and why each of those is important to you?
Gold, we own 100% of an asset in Arizona, which is 3 gold mines previously producing. When we first started work, we found a number of waste dumps and left behind pillars underground which contain gold that could be exploited. However, with SRK having done a number of reviews and produced a competent person's report, they said, if you go after the waste dump immediately, you're not going to be able to benefit from a bigger picture that is available to you. And when I say a bigger picture, what we're exploring and we're looking at is the possibility of developing some sort of an open pit mine in the area. And to do that, we need to make sure that the elements are there to financially enable us, economically and financially enable us to deliver that. And that's what we're looking at the moment. So we're looking at expanding what we have. We're looking at developing that. And we're doing work on the ground at the moment. We're going through a geosampling process. We're collecting about 1,100 geochemical samples, and that will set the pathway for us to go forward.
Would the intention be to drill?
The intention would be to use that as the mechanism for us to identify the key drilling targets. And there be some further work post the geochemical before the drilling, but the intention would be, so geochem, then we would go into trenching, then we would go into possibly drilling. But we need to go through those steps to make sure that we get the tick in the box that we're actually on the right path. The fallback position is we have a number of waste dumps that we could potentially exploit.
Fantastic. It's always good to have a fallback position, Rolf.
We also have a small stake in a company called LVG. LVG is a privately owned company that has a small gold asset in Tanzania. We own about 3% of it, and they're progressing their work, and they are working towards pouring first gold in early 2023. So they're going through a number of stages, and they're seeking to move the asset forward. So we'll see what happens there. There's a nice little project that could turn into something. We then have an interest in BritNRG, which is problematic at this point, Donald, because we've got some legal issues, and I prefer not to comment on that because there are these legal issues that have been announced to the market, so people are aware of it, but I can't really comment too much on it because of these issues, so I prefer not to comment to get anyone into, or even myself, into any sort of difficult situation. So I prefer not to comment on that. Uranium is fascinating, I believe, because one, the price of uranium has been quite spectacular in its increase. But what we have is a small interest at this stage, around 10% of a project in Kyrgyzstan. Now, about 18 months ago, the government in Kyrgyzstan put a ban on all exploitation of uranium in country. We had on the area, on the license that we were working on, we had the company we were working with, IMC out of New York, was a company that had a mining license for the area, for the extraction. And we were working on putting together the financing package. But when the ban came about, we had to put a stop to it. So the project has been sitting there, and the way that it is developing now is that in country, we had elections on the 28th of November, and there is a new pro-exploitation of certain projects of uranium government that is being brought in by the vote. That means that there is a possibility that the license will be reinstated, not necessarily on all projects, but on ours. And the reason ours is particular is that in the old days, most of the uranium mines in country were up in the mountains. And the environmental approach in country, I'd say, was haphazard. As a result, a lot of the uranium flowed down into the farmland at the bottom of those mountains. And there's fields of bog and peat, which is now impregnated with this uranium. And our license is to clean up some of these farming fields. In fact, the plan that we've presented would clean up the fields to the extent that they would be returned to farming land once we've completed our operation. And on the back of that, there is a good possibility that the mining license would be reinstated. If it is reinstated, then we have the right to earn up to 51% of the project if we contribute financing towards the development of the project. That 51% of the project will most likely not be done through equity, but it will be done through some sort of offtake agreement, project finance, development finance. But while we previously had some offtake agreements in place, when the ban was imposed, of course, those disappeared. So at the moment, we're waiting. The noise coming out of country is positive, but there's nothing firm yet. But we're waiting, and we'll see how it develops. But it's a very interesting project that, if we have the ability to bring it into production, would be an extremely good earner for us because of the prices and also the cost of mining.
Indeed. No, it does sound really interesting, doesn't it? You may not appreciate this question, but I suddenly saw it on Twitter. Someone was criticizing you on Twitter for some of these projects being green, some of these projects not being green, and I just wondered if you minded that people said these things about you.
Look, Donald, they've called me a lot worse than not being green.
You're very good, Rolf.
Having said that, look, the uranium, as I described, I think that fits very nicely into a cleanup project.
It does.
I think gold, what we do is we're working in Arizona, and Arizona is one of the top mining districts in the world. And according to the Fraser Institute, not according to me. And what we ensure is that we apply very stringent, environmentally friendly processes. And if we're going to dig something up, we will return it to its previous state once we've dug it up. So we take a very environmental friendly approach. Having said that, correctly so, some people are saying, well, this is not really environmental friendly. I understand that. But we as a company are also going through a transition, as the rest of the world is, and moving towards the green, sustainable economy. And I think EQTEC offers us that possibility, and that's why the share swap, that's why the drive on that area, because of the transition that we're interested in going through. So look, as I said, I've been called a lot worse than not being green, and I don't mind it, because the intention is to make sure that we do address these issues as we enter operations.
Great, that's a really good answer. Okay, final question, and I'm going to roll my two last questions into one. What news flow can we expect in 2022 from you? Sounds as though you've got a lot going on. And why invest in MetalNRG? You know, what's your investment summary? So let's combine those two. Final question.
All right. In terms of news flow, we've got news flow that will come out of GoldRidge. We will have the geosampling results that will then establish exactly the next step that we go through, and that will then produce results which we will also have further news on. Third, on GoldRidge, there's potentially, and it's very early days, but there's some external interest in people that people have expressed, companies have expressed in looking at working with us on GoldRidge. So maybe we'll see. Early days, but something might come from that. We'll see what happens. So there's GoldRidge for you. I do expect some news out of Kyrgyzstan, and I do therefore expect some news out of the uranium projects. And as I said briefly before, I think it could well be positive. BritNRG, we're working through a process. We'll keep the market informed as and when we can. And then last but not least, on the EQTEC side, we're going to have the recommissioning of the plant in Italy, which will probably be Q2 of this year. And that means that will start producing revenue for the Italian joint venture company that we've set up. And we are looking at additional investments. So I would expect some further news out of that. So I think there's quite a lot going on, and there's quite a bit of news flow to expect over the course of the year. In terms of why invest in MetalNRG, and I think there's a few reasons here. I think we have a balanced portfolio of assets that offer upside on an individual basis. So if you look at it project by project, each of them offer potential upside. Each of them offer risks, but I think it's a balanced portfolio. And I think at least 2 of the 3 or 4 will come through and be good. So there's that balance, which I think diminishes risk, but increases potential upside. And I think the other aspect here that one needs to look at very carefully is our share price. And if you look at our share price today, personally, I don't see much downside because we're at such a low level. When I last looked, we were at about 3.5, 3.6 million. And, you know, with the new criteria on London main market, because we're on the main market segment, with the new criteria coming in of the minimum requirements of 30 million for a company to be listed, you know, you start looking at shells that are valued at 3-4 million on the London main market segment. And therefore, I think the share price in terms of where it can go is only on the up. Having said that, I doubt you're going to find any CEO who says the opposite. But I firmly believe it, and I'm personally, along with the board, invested quite heavily in MetalNRG. So we do, all of us, see quite a bit of upside.
Rolf Gerritsen, CEO at MetalNRG. Thank you so much for speaking to us today, Rolf. I've learned that you're a complete star, so fantastic. It was great to meet you virtually. I'm really delighted to have had the opportunity to do this interview with you. MetalNRG have an active chat board on London South East, so please do jump on there and share your thoughts. I'm presuming you're probably already doing that, actually. If you'd like to comment about MetalNRG on Twitter, our Twitter account is @London South East. And to see more interviews like this one, please do Google London South East YouTube channel. You'll get there and it'll give you a big red button which says subscribe. And if you subscribe, you'll get alerts to interviews just like this one. Thank you for watching as ever, and do stay safe.